This movie changed my life in so many ways. And there were 22 prosthetics that Kazu eventually came down to. We had different iterations of how much of Mark I would look like. It was very important to Benny.
Do you hate each other when you fight?
Absolutely not.
Can you explain how you first learned who Mark Kerr was and even crossed paths with him a long time ago?
I did, yeah. I met Mark in the late 90s, and he was a legend, as you guys now know. And back then, our pro wrestling and MMA DNAs would cross often. We were in the same venues and the same gyms. We knew the same guys. And in the mid-2000s is when I first saw the documentary of The Smashing Machine. It's really compelling because it chronicles Mark's life, but in the end, he loses, and he loses everything. And he feels like maybe 1,000 miles from grace, and that was the end of the documentary. Years later, I reached out to Mark and I said, hey, I'd love to buy your rights to your story. I think there's something really compelling, especially not only the first half of your life, but maybe more importantly, the second half of your life where you've OD'd twice, you're lucky to be alive, and you have this profound sense of gratitude. And then in 2019, I saw Uncut Gems, and I loved the film, and I met with Benny, and we thought that there could be something here. I said, Benny, I love your shooting style and what you've been able to do. We hit it off right away, and he loved the documentary, and here we are.
Yeah. So, Benny, when Dwayne first approached you, again, after you'd made Uncut Gems, another film about a different sort of addiction, we should note, I wonder, how familiar you were with extreme fighting generally, but specifically also with Mark Kerr.
So I at that point, I had actually been involved in boxing for myself, probably for at like 10 years. At one point I was going to do an amateur fight. I was getting connected. Turns out I was connected to be a loser. They were pumping me up, and I was training really hard, and I was sparring. When you're in a boxing gym, it's a very aggressive place, you'd think, but it's actually very loving. There's a real tenderness and support amongst everybody there that even when you lose and you've had the worst sparring match of your life, somebody's like, oh, but in that second round, you really got him on this. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I did. You saw that? I felt that. And it's like, it really is. You build up with one another, and you learn about each other's lives. And some of the most meaningful experiences I've had seeing fights was seeing people I know. And when they lose, it means that much more. When they win, it means that much more. So being connected to the person inside the ring was something I was really interested in. So when Dwayne approached me with this, it was almost like, this is something I've been dying to explore. And then I see this documentary, and then on top of that, emotionally it resonates with me on such a deep level. Here you have this person who is seemingly invincible, which I can't relate to that, but I could relate to the fact that he had a deep pain and he was struggling, and he didn't let other people know that, and he hid that from people. I could relate to that. And the fact also that he didn't let that define him in the end. And I thought that was really beautiful.
Emily, you and Dwayne go back quite a ways and have become close. You've worked together once before. Can you just share a little bit about your history and way that you've gotten to know each other and work together, and how you came to re-team on this one?
I mean, we worked together on a much lighter fare called Jungle Cruise, which bears absolutely no relation to what we did here. But I just thought he was just magical to work with, and so present, so agile. We could improv together. The scene could go anywhere. It completely went off the rails most of the time. We stayed in touch, and we talked about other things we could maybe do together. And there were a few that we sort of kicked the can down the road on. And then I could sense in him, when we would talk, this sort of growing restlessness for more, for a rib cage crack open. And when can I do it? How could I do that? And can I do that? And I think I was always thinking there was this well of undiscovered, these extraordinary characters like The Rock, which is like the antithesis of Dwayne. Like when you meet Dwayne, you're like, oh, that's the performance of a lifetime. He's nothing like you, And so I really was excited by like, maybe Dwayne Johnson's one of our great character actors. And like, and then Benny comes along and goes, I believe in you. And I was like, I believe in him. And then we reteamed, and I didn't want to sort of muscle my way into this movie. I'm very grateful that you didn't make me beg, but
No, it was because I didn't know. I was like, who could do this? And I just was watching. First, a clip came on, and it was the two of them like getting ready to go to the Oscars, actually. And there was just something between them that I was like, oh my God, that's it. And I texted DJ. I said, it has to be Emily. And I knew I was actually going to do a Q&A with Emily for Oppenheimer, and I was like rushing to finish the script so that I could say like, hey, can I send you this? And like I texted it to her, and then we talked a lot about how we could build the character, and then Emily spoke with Dawn to really understand her point of view on it. The whole thing lives and breathes, and that's just the way that I like to work. And for their performances to be so alive and present, it really is just one of the greatest things to be a part of and to witness, because I try to create an environment where there's no mistakes and everything is always a positive step in the right direction, because eventually you're going to get there, Yeah.
For anyone who just needs a reminder of a fraction of the great work that Kazu has done, he is the man who turned Gary Oldman into Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour, and Charlize Theron into Megyn Kelly in Bombshell, and we could go on and on. But I wonder if you can share a little bit about what your specific objectives were when you had Dwayne in the chair for 3 or 4 hours each morning. What were you aiming to change and also to preserve about Dwayne?
Yes, usually whenever we do a likeness makeup, its important part is what is the goal of storytelling in the movie. So I had a discussion with Benny. Okay, how close you want Dwayne look like a Mark, and so. There's a different, if I have a time, I can come up with 10 different answers. Benny told me I want to keep the Dwayne, but to give an essence of Mark Carr. So, okay, let me do 2 different sculptures. One is more kind of extreme side, and one is the more subtle side. After sculpture's done, we have the talk, and so we agreed to do subtle ones. And so it made sense too, because there's a lot of wrestling and fighting scene in the movie, and he had to go through the sweating and the grappling. Everybody's sweat is different. Some people has more oil in it, and some people who loves alcohol has alcohol in the sweat. That dissolved the glue. If they had too much alcohol, last night, the day before. So that's the thing. And
I'm sorry, Kazu.
but it never fell off.
It never fell off.
But it's a good thing, so we can pick different glues, and he had to go through different stages of the fighting, so beating up on the face and that. We had to secure the design first, then those are swollen eyes and the body scars, and including a wig too.
To be honest with you guys, I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to have this opportunity, so I ran towards it, and I didn't know what I was running to, but I knew I had to go to it when you listen to that little voice behind your rib cage. And there were 22 prosthetics that Kazu eventually came down to. We had different iterations of how much of Mark I would look like. It was very important to Benny. His words, not mine. Said, there's something about your eyes that I want to make sure that I maintain. Because if you meaning me, Dwayne, was going to go through this this life lesson, and I did go through this life. So this movie changed my life in so many ways. And he said, I want to make sure in some cinematic way, artistic way, that I capture that as you go through this journey. And so working with Kazu was amazing. I sat there 4 hours every morning, and I was able to, there was a physical transformation, so there was that transformation. And of course, the other one was probably the most difficult, was the emotional transformation, because there's Mark Kerr back in the early 90s, which you guys saw, who was dominant and undefeated. And then there's Mark Kerr today, who is alive and co-parenting, and they have an amazing kid, and he's grateful to be alive, and he's still so soft and tender, but he's still like an animal. So, Kazu, thank you, by the way, for everything you've
Thank you very
done.
much.
You're welcome.
So
There you go, Scott.
Thank you. Congratulations, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.